Arizona Territory, May of 1879. The sand had not cooled from the morning sun when Fletcher Langston rode into Jericho Flats with a warrant in his coat pocket and a storm behind his eyes. He dismounted slow, dust trailing off his boots with each step toward the sheriff's office. The town was nothing more than a row of weather-worn buildings clinging to the edge of the desert, but Fletcher had learned long ago that the smallest places held the deepest secrets, and he was here to find one. Inside the office, the sheriff, an older man with a crooked badge and 2 fingers missing, leaned back in his chair. "You Langston?" he asked, already knowing Fletcher nodded. "I am, came from Yavapai County. I am looking for a man named Silas Mercer. Shot a federal officer near Prescott. Word is he's hiding with kin out this way." The sheriff scratched under his hat. "Ain't seen him, but his sister lives here. Married a rancher, died last winter. She works at the dressmaker's now, keeps to herself." Fletcher's jaw tightened. "I will talk to her." He found the shop on the south edge of town. There was a child sitting on the stoop, a girl no older than 7, clutching a worn doll with yarn hair. Her dress was too thin for the sun, and she looked up at him with tired, cautious eyes. "Is your mother inside?" he asked gently. The girl nodded. "She is sewing. You can go in if you want." He stepped into the dim shop and everything stopped. She stood at the back, bent over a bolt of blue calico, hair pinned high and face streaked with quiet determination. She looked up when the door clicked shut and something shifted behind her eyes. Fear, maybe, recognition. "I am not here to hurt you," he said quickly, holding up both hands. "Name's Fletcher Langston. I am a federal marshal." Her hands froze. "Then you are here for my brother." "I am." She straightened slowly. "I have not seen Silas in 2 years. He left after the war. He was not the same." Fletcher studied her. "What is your name?" "Persephone Jameson." She said it with a kind of tired pride, as though she had been forced to say it too many times to too many men who did not believe her. He nodded. "I believe you." She looked at him then, long and quiet. "Most do not." He stepped closer, voice low. "But you are hiding something." Her chin lifted. "I am not." The girl from the stoop pushed the door open again and walked in. "Mama, I am thirsty." Persephone knelt, brushing the child's hair back. "There is water on the stove, baby." Fletcher watched the exchange. "She is yours?" "Yes." "Her name is Lottie." "Where is her father?" Persephone stood. "Gone, years now. He left when I told him I was carrying her." Fletcher nodded, the truth of it sitting heavy between them. "I do not want your brother's head. I just want justice for the man he killed." Persephone's eyes filled with something old and worn. "Then you may have to look elsewhere. He would not come here." Fletcher hesitated, then pulled the warrant from his coat and laid it on the counter. "If he does, you come find me." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Marshal, do you believe in second chances?" He paused. "I believe in truth." That night, Fletcher stayed in the boarding house above the saloon. He meant to sleep, but his thoughts kept circling back to her Persephone Jameson with her quiet strength and haunted eyes. He was up before dawn. By noon, he had his answer. Silas Mercer had been seen 2 days ago west of town, traveling with a band of cattle rustlers. The sheriff confirmed that he was headed for the border. Fletcher was readying his horse when he heard the yelling. A man had burst into the dress shop, dragging Persephone out by the wrist. Lottie screamed behind her. The man was shouting something about a runaway bride, about a debt owed. Fletcher was off his horse before it stopped moving. The man had her shoved against the post outside the shop, his hand raised. "That is enough," Fletcher snapped, voice sharp as a whip. The man turned. "This is none of your business." Fletcher pulled his badge. "She is under federal protection now," the man laughed. "She is my wife. She ran off before the wedding, took my money and vanished." Persephone's voice was shaking. "He paid my uncle. I never agreed to anything." Fletcher stepped between them. "You got papers." The man went red. "She is mine." Fletcher's hand went to his revolver. "Not anymore." The man backed off, muttering under his breath. Persephone was shaking, but she did not cry. She pulled Lottie close and held her tight. Fletcher looked at her. "You need to leave town." She nodded. "He will come back." I will take you somewhere safe, she blinked. Why would you do that? He looked at the little girl clinging to her side. Because no child should grow up watching her mother be dragged through the dirt. Persephone swallowed hard. Thank you, she whispered. Fletcher looked away, throat tight. Pack what you can, we leave at nightfall. When the sun dipped low, they rode out. Lottie sat in front of Persephone on the saddle, her head resting against her mother's chest. Fletcher led them through the dry hills, every step taking them farther from danger. They made camp by an old cottonwood tree. The fire crackled low, casting soft light on Persephone's face as she wrapped Lottie in a blanket. I do not know what to say, she said quietly. You do not have to say anything. I have not had anyone fight for me before. Fletcher looked at her. You deserve that and more. She smiled just a little. You do not even know me. I know enough. She looked away, but her voice was softer now. Where will we go? There is a widow in Gila Bend. She owes me a favor. You can rest there. Persephone nodded, and after that, Fletcher hesitated. That depends on you, on what you want. She looked at him, really looked at him, and her eyes did not hold fear anymore, just something new, something warm. I want to feel safe. I want to stop running. Fletcher reached across the fire and took her hand just for a moment. Then you will, he said. I promise. And in that quiet desert night, with the stars spread wide above them, Persephone Jameson believed him. The morning after they left Jericho Flats, a thin veil of cloud stretched across the sky, dimming the desert's harsh light. Persephone rode beside Fletcher in silence, Lottie nestled against her chest beneath a woven shawl. The girl's breath warmed the fabric, and each rise and fall of her small chest steadied Persephone's own. Fletcher led them south, following a dry wash that carved through the sandstone. The land opened wide here, no trees, just low scrub and the occasional tall saguaro rising like sentinels in the stillness. Around midday, they stopped beneath an outcrop that offered a modest strip of shade. As Persephone dismounted, her knees buckled. Fletcher caught her elbow without a word. She's heavy, she murmured, shifting Lottie in her arms. Let me, he said. She hesitated, then let him take the girl. Fletcher cradled Lottie gently, resting her against his shoulder while Persephone stretched her legs and rubbed her wrists. Her fingers were red where the reins had chafed. You ever ride that far in one go before? He asked, watching her flex her hand. Not since my husband sold our horse. I used to help my father trail cattle when I was young, but that was before everything turned. Fletcher glanced at her. What did he die of? She didn't answer right away. Then he didn't. He drank himself past caring and left us to fend alone. I buried my mother the same year. Fletcher didn't speak. He reached into his saddlebag, pulled out a tin of jerky and handed her a piece. She took it, chewed slowly. Lottie stirred but didn't wake. I was 16 when I left home, Persephone said. I followed a man who promised land and a roof. He had neither. Fletcher adjusted Lottie's shawl, tucking it beneath her chin. What kept you going? She did. He nodded. That's enough reason. They rode on after that. By dusk, they reached a small arroyo where cottonwoods grew thicker and the air cooled. Fletcher set up camp while Persephone gathered dry twigs. She moved carefully, her back stiff from the ride, but her hands were steady. Water's low, he said, checking the canteens. There's a spring a ways south. We'll refill in the morning. She knelt beside the fire pit he'd dug and struck flint until sparks caught. The glow rose slow, casting soft light up her arms. Fletcher watched her work, noting the neatness of her kindling, the way she built the heat gradually. Lottie sat beside him now, drawing circles in the dirt with a stick. She hadn't spoken much all day, but she watched everything with quiet intensity. Your daughter's sharp, he said. She sees more than I want her to, Persephone replied, brushing soot from her fingers. I reckon she'll be strong if she follows your lead. Persephone smiled, faint and fleeting. I keep hoping she won't have to be. They ate from a tin of beans and the last of the dried apples Fletcher had packed. Afterward, Lottie curled beside her mother, head tucked against her ribs. Fletcher stretched out a few feet away, hat tilted down over his eyes. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It had the weight of things understood, not avoided, After a long while, Persephone's voice drifted across the fire. "Why did you become a marshal?" He rolled his hat up, resting it on his stomach. "My uncle raised me after my folks were killed. He carried a badge, said the law wasn't always right, but it was better than vengeance." "Do you believe that?" I try to. She looked toward the stars. "I used to think if I did everything right, I'd be safe, that if I kept quiet and polite, I'd be left alone." Fletcher sat up, elbows on his knees. "That's not the world we live in." "No," she said. "It isn't." The fire crackled low. Lottie sighed in her sleep, and Persephone brushed a lock of hair from the girl's cheek. Fletcher watched her fingers linger. "Once we reach Gila Bend," he said, "you'll have a roof. But that man back in Jericho won't forget. I know. If he comes back, I'll handle it." She didn't thank him. Instead, she met his eyes across the coals. "You don't owe us anything?" "I didn't have to stop that day," he replied. "But you did." He nodded once. She reached for the canteen and handed it to him. Their fingers touched, and something passed between them, quiet and new. Neither of them spoke again that night. The wind picked up just before dawn. Fletcher woke to the scent of dust and the sound of distant hoofbeats. He nudged Persephone gently. "Riders," he said. She blinked awake, pulled Lottie close. "How many?" "Hard to say." "Stay low." He crept to the edge of the arroyo, peering through scrub. 3 men, maybe 4, moving slow along the ridge, not traveling fast enough to be a posse and too quiet for ranch hands. He returned to the fire. "We need to move." Persephone didn't argue. She wrapped Lottie in a spare blanket, tied it tight, and helped the girl onto the horse. Fletcher secured the bedrolls, scattered the fire's remnants, and led them east, away from the spring. The sun rose behind them as they rode low and gold, catching on Persephone's hair where it had come loose. Fletcher didn't look directly at her, but he didn't need to. He could feel the shift. She trusted him now. And that was something he would not waste. By late afternoon, the sun beat low through a haze of dust and heat. The trail Fletcher followed bent southward through a stretch of high desert, where mesquite and ocotillo gave way to hardpan and the scent of dry sage. Persephone rode in silence, one hand steady on the reins, the other cradling Lottie, who dozed against her side. Fletcher kept a watchful eye on the horizon. The riders hadn't reappeared, but he didn't mistake quiet for safety. They reached a shallow basin as the light began to tilt. A few scattered stones marked where water once pooled during monsoon, now dry and cracked. Fletcher pulled up at the edge, motioning for Persephone to stop. "There's an old stagecoach route just over that ridge," he said. "If we follow it west, we'll reach the widow's claim by tomorrow." Persephone adjusted her shawl. "Will she take us in?" "She'll ask questions first," he said. "But she's fair, lost her brother in the war, spends her days tending goats and reading scripture, has a room in the back she keeps for travelers." Persephone glanced down at her daughter. "We won't be trouble." Fletcher didn't answer that. He dismounted and walked ahead, scanning the brush with practiced eyes. A jackrabbit darted beneath a clump of kala. He noted the tracks, no fresh hoofprints beside their own. He turned back. "We'll stop here for the night. There's enough brush to hide the fire." While he built the pit, Persephone laid Lottie down on a folded blanket and unwrapped a cloth bundle from her bag. Inside were 3 small biscuits, hard with travel, and a bit of dried peach. She broke one in half and handed it to Fletcher. He took it without a word. As the fire settled into a low orange glow, Persephone sat with her legs crossed beneath her skirt, shoulders drawn close. Fletcher watched her for a moment before speaking. "You ever think of leaving Arizona altogether?" "I did once," she said. "After my husband vanished, I thought I'd go east, but I had no family left, and I couldn't read then." He stirred the fire with a stick. "You can now," I learned from a traveling preacher. He stayed the winter 1 year and left me his Bible." She smiled faintly. It was missing the book of Ruth, but the rest was sound. Fletcher glanced at her. "You read to Lottie?" "Every evening," she said, "even if she's too tired to listen." He nodded, then asked, "What would you do if you could go anywhere?" She considered that. "I'd like to see where the trees go tall enough to block the sun. Where there's rain in summer and grass that doesn't cut your hands. Colorado territory, he said. Near the San Juan Mountains. I was stationed there once. Was it beautiful? More than most things, he said. But lonely. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I've lived with loneliness too long to find it beautiful. The fire popped softly between them. Lottie stirred, and Persephone rose to pull a blanket higher over her shoulders. Her movements were slow now, tired but careful, like someone who'd been taught to take up as little space as possible. Fletcher stood and walked to his saddlebag. He pulled out a folded map, worn and creased down the middle. If you wanted to go north, he said, you'd need to pass through Gila Bend, then Tucson. After that, it's a hard stretch, but folks make it. Persephone looked down at the map, then back at him. And you? I go where I'm needed. She studied him. That ever get lonely? He didn't answer right away. I never thought much about it, until now. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of creosote and the hush of distant coyotes. Persephone sat again, this time closer to the fire, her knees drawn up beneath her skirt. I don't know what happens after we reach that widow, she said, but I want to stop feeling like I'm one wrong breath from losing everything. You won't, he said, not while I'm with you. She looked up, and for the first time her eyes held something unguarded. Not fear, not weariness, just a question, wordless and soft. Fletcher held her gaze. I've spent years chasing men who took what wasn't theirs. It feels right to protect something for once. Persephone's voice dropped. And if I asked you to stay, his jaw worked, the tension in it quiet but clear. I'd have to stop running too. She didn't press him. Instead, she reached out and placed her hand over his where it rested on the ground between them. Her touch was sure, not hesitant, not asking. They sat like that until the fire burned low, until the stars spun slow overhead and Lottie's breathing evened out again. Neither said another word. They didn't need to. There was something settling into place between them, like the way wind shapes stone, a quiet promise, not spoken but understood. The sun rose behind them the next day, soft and gold through a veil of morning dust. The trail turned rockier as they neared the edge of the Gila River basin, the land flattening into long, low stretches of gravel and bone-dry mesquite. Fletcher rode ahead, scanning for signs of movement, his rifle tied across the saddle horn. Persephone followed quietly, Lottie pressed against her, wrapped in the same wool blanket that still smelled faintly of last night's fire. They reached the widow's claim just past mid-morning. It sat atop a narrow rise, a one-story adobe with whitewashed walls and a sloped tin roof weathered to dull gray. A few goats wandered the yard, heads low to the scrub. A windmill creaked steadily, its blades turning slow in the breeze. Fletcher dismounted first. Her name's Mary Tillman. Don't say much, but she keeps her word. Persephone stayed in the saddle a moment longer, eyes fixed on the house. And she'll let us stay, she will, he said. I'll vouch for you. Mary appeared in the doorway as they approached, sleeves rolled, apron streaked with flour. Her eyes passed over Fletcher first, then lingered on Persephone and Lottie. She stepped forward without a word, wiping her hands on her apron. You look like you've seen the worst of the world, she said, voice low and even. Persephone didn't flinch. I've been near enough to it. Mary nodded once, then stepped aside. Come in. The girl looks hungry. Inside, the house smelled of yeast and wood smoke. A pot simmered on the stove and a fresh loaf cooled on the windowsill. Mary guided them toward the back room with a firm hand. You'll find a cot and basin. The girl can sleep next to you. I'll bring wash water when it's hot. Persephone paused by the threshold. Thank you. I don't have anything to offer in return. Mary waved it off. I didn't ask. Fletcher remained in the kitchen, watching as the goats wandered past the open window. Mary set a tin plate in front of him, heaped with beans and cornbread. She's carrying something heavy, she said simply. She's carried it a long time. Mary poured herself coffee, then sat across from him. You plan to leave her here? I plan to, he said. But plans change. She studied him for a long moment. You think she wants you to stay? I don't know yet. Mary took a sip of coffee. Then find out before the trail pulls you away. Afternoon settled quiet and warm. Fletcher repaired the barn door while Mary took Lottie to feed the goats. Persephone stood under the shade of the porch's overhang, sleeves rolled, hair pinned close to her neck. She watched him work without speaking, arms folded loosely across her ribs. He hammered the last hinge back into place and turned toward her. "You could rest." "I don't know how to anymore," she said. "Not really." He stepped down from the ladder, brushing sawdust from his palms. "You don't have to earn your place here, not with me." Her gaze didn't drop. "I'm not used to kindness that doesn't come with expectation." "I don't want anything from you." She hesitated. "Then why are you still here?" He looked past her toward the sloping ridge behind the house. "Because when I left Yavapai County, I was chasing a man who ran from justice. I didn't expect to find someone who'd already survived more than her share of it." She walked toward the edge of the porch, fingers grazing the worn rail. "What happens when you find Silas?" "I take him in. Alive if I can. And if he comes here instead, then I'll be waiting." She turned to him, voice steady. "He isn't cruel, but he doesn't believe in the law anymore, not after the war. I've seen men like that. They break themselves trying to outrun what they did." "I think he already has," Fletcher nodded. "If he comes, I'll listen first, then decide." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. "He left this behind once. Maybe it'll help you understand him." Fletcher unfolded it carefully. The writing was uneven, the ink faded, a short line about a river he'd crossed, a name scratched out. Then below that, written clearer, a single line. "I've done what I can to fix what I broke." He folded it again. "He may not be running, he may be looking to stop." She watched him carefully. "Do you think people like us can? Only if we stop running together." She stepped down from the porch and stood in front of him. "Then stay." He searched her face, the wind brushing a loose strand of hair across her cheek. He tucked it behind her ear without thinking. "I will," he said. Lottie's laughter rang out from behind the barn, chasing after a bleeding goat. Mary stood nearby, arms crossed, her face unreadable. Persephone reached for Fletcher's hand. "I don't want to be afraid anymore." "You won't be," he said, and this time she believed it not because he promised, but because he stayed. The monsoon rains came late that year, not with thunder but with a hush that softened the air and turned the dust to clay. Fletcher stood beneath the eaves of Mary's porch, sleeves rolled past his elbows, watching the water bead along the edge of the roof. Inside, the house was quiet, save for the low murmur of Persephone's voice reading from an old leather-bound book Mary had offered her. She'd taken to walking the small goat trail behind the house each morning, Lottie clinging to her skirts, her eyes brighter now, her voice less wary. The girl had begun humming again, tuneless but sweet, and Persephone no longer startled at every sound from the road. Fletcher stepped inside as the rain thickened. Persephone looked up from the rocking chair, her feet bare beneath her hem. Lottie was asleep, curled across the wide seat of a nearby bench, cheeks flushed with sun and supper. "She's been dreaming," Persephone said softly. "Talks in her sleep now, happy things. Once she said something about a green pond and a swing. She ever seen a pond?" "Not that I know of." Fletcher nodded toward the window. "Storm'll pass by morning. Mary said the river'll rise after that." Persephone closed the book, resting it on her lap. "You still plan to bring Silas in if he shows?" "I do." She looked down at her hands. "I keep thinking about what he was before the war. He used to draw maps on the back of our flour sacks, said he'd chart the whole country one day." Fletcher leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "There's a kind of mercy in remembering people how they were." She glanced up. "You think he deserves mercy?" "I think we all do if we don't run from what we've done." She was quiet a moment, then said, "I wouldn't keep him from you." "If he came, I know." They let the silence stretch, thick with the patter of rain. Fletcher watched her thumb brush the spine of the book, slow and absent. "You ever think about staying?" she asked. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Most days I've been here." She stood, careful not to wake Lottie, and moved toward the stove. "I've been waiting for the part where things fall apart like they always used to." He stepped beside her, not touching her, but close enough she could feel his warmth. Maybe this is the part where they don't. She turned to face him fully, rain tapping against the window behind her. I don't want a man who disappears when it gets hard. I've disappeared before, he said. But not from you. Her eyes searched his, and something quiet settled in her chest like breath after a long climb. Then stay. He lifted her hand and pressed it to his chest. I already have. They stood like that until Mary stepped in from the other room, wiping her hands on her apron. She raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. You can take the barn room, she said to Fletcher. No need to sleep on the porch anymore. By midweek, the rains cleared fully. The air carried the scent of wet mesquite and new grass, and the goats wandered farther from the yard, content to graze under the last of the clouded sky. Fletcher took down Mary's fence and replaced the rotted posts. Persephone mended old linens into proper curtains. Lottie followed them both, barefoot and curious, her laughter more frequent now. One afternoon, as the sun crept toward the ridge, a rider approached from the west. Fletcher stepped out with his rifle slung low, jaw set, but the man rode slow, hands visible. He wore a battered hat and a coat too large for his frame. His face was leaner than the drawing on the warrant, but his eyes were the same. Silas Mercer, Fletcher said. The man dismounted, raised both hands. I heard she was safe here. I didn't come to run. Persephone stood in the doorway, Lottie at her side. She didn't speak. I crossed the border last spring, Silas said. Worked a mine outside Magdalena, got word from a man in Tucson that a marshal was asking after me. You shot a federal officer, Fletcher said. I did. He was beating a boy half his size in the street. I didn't mean to kill him, but I didn't regret stopping him either. Fletcher looked him over carefully. You willing to stand trial? I am. Persephone stepped forward. They'll hang you. Silas shook his head. Not if I tell the truth. And if they do, then they do. I won't keep running. Fletcher considered him, then nodded. We'll leave at first light. I'll take you in myself. Silas looked at Persephone, his expression softer than Fletcher expected. You look well. I am, she said. He nodded once. Good. That night, Persephone packed a small parcel of bread and dried goat cheese. Fletcher saddled his horse before dawn. When Silas stepped forward, Persephone handed him the bundle, her hand brushing his for the first time in years. I hope you find peace, she said. I already did, he replied, glancing toward Lottie sleeping in the crook of Mary's arm. Fletcher rode with Silas for 3 days, through low desert and cactus flats until they reached the marshal post in Tucson. The man in charge listened, read the letter Fletcher had written detailing the circumstances, and agreed to hold Silas for trial without bonds, citing his voluntary surrender. When Fletcher returned to the claim, Persephone was out back, hanging linens in the sun. He dismounted and walked toward her without a word. She turned when she heard his step, and they looked at each other for a long, steady moment. He's safe, Fletcher said. Trial's in November. She held out the clothespin she'd been using, and he took it without question, helping her fasten the sheet in place. I want to build something here, she said. A life that isn't just survival. He met her gaze. You won't have to build it alone. That night, they sat on the porch as the stars came out, Lottie asleep behind the screen door, Mary humming softly inside. Persephone leaned her head against Fletcher's shoulder. I never thought I'd feel safe like this, she said. He wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her closer. You're not just safe, you're home. She smiled, not out of hope but certainty. They married that winter under a cottonwood tree that had survived 3 floods and twice as many droughts. Mary cooked the bread and carved a small wooden cross for the wall. Lottie carried a bundle of wildflowers and refused to walk slow, so Persephone laughed through most of the ceremony. Fletcher carved a new post for the gate and burned their initials into the flat of it. They planted beans in spring, and by summer, the ground held more than it had in years. There were still hard days. The land never gave without asking something first. But they rose with the sun and worked side by side, built a home that held warmth in winter and shade in summer, and when the wind came down from the ridge, they sat close and let it pass together. And for the first time in both their lives, they weren't waiting for something to go wrong. They were living, fully and together, in the life they'd chosen.